Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Insurance Experts and Financial Planning Innovation. It's my pleasure to have on the line Phil Lubinski. Phil is a certified financial planner. He's been doing retirement income planning for over 30 years. And he's also the co founder of a software program that I think is quite innovative, and we're going to share with you today. So, Phil, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Mark. This is a pleasure for me.
So there aren't a lot of CFPs that develop their own software program, and you have one that's called IncomeConductor that we're going to talk about today. Where did that idea come from, creating a software program?
Well, I guess, initially it was a Lotus spreadsheet back in the 80s. And so it only had application in my own practice. And then as this strategy that I developed started getting more attention, some companies were coming to me and saying, gee, this is a strategy we'd like to make available to other advisors, but we certainly can't do it with your Lotus 1, 2, 3 spreadsheets. So I ended up kind of consulting software companies on building this and did that with two different companies. And then roughly 6 years ago now, I teamed up with one of my other co-founders, Cheryl O'Connor, and we decided to just create our own financial technology company. And we would not just consult on the software, we'd own the software, and then we could make enhancements as we wanted to, not at the mercy of the company that we were consulting to.
Mhm. That's awesome. I mean, I experienced this myself with long-term care insurance planning. I developed a software program to do screen share kind of consultations with clients, and how effective that was. So what I'd really love to see today, if you can show it to us, is how the planning process looks with your software program. So if you could do me a favor and share your screen, and we'll kind of take it from the top. And we're going to presume that you have a client that's approaching retirement. And so initially, you're setting up the client here. What are the kind of the main initial parameters you need to set with the client so you can begin the planning process?
Yeah, so what we wanted to do with this is, number one, make it very simple and something that you could literally engage the client in so that they could see and be involved in the building of their own plan. And I guess to kind of preface this is not a software that was designed to replace full-blown financial planning software. So we have a lot of advisors that still use eMoney and MoneyGuide Pro and Navaplan. But it is focused on retirement income planning. So the data that we need isn't always as extensive as what you would need in some other more comprehensive softwares. So right now you see that, initially anyway, we're just getting name, birth date, some demographics, and at the bottom, when does the client want to retire? So it could be immediately, it could be as many years into the future as the client wants to see, and then how long of a plan do we agree on is reasonable. So in this case here, I've just artificially made you 65 years old, and I'm sure your audience is amazed at how good you've held up at 65 years old. But you are single right now for this demonstration, and
Don't tell my wife.
That's right. And we both just arrived at 25 years. Taking you to age 90, is probably adequate. There's certainly more extensive ways that we can kind of determine the length of a plan, but for purposes of today, let's just arbitrarily pick age 90 as your end date. So we have your start date and we have your end date.
Very cool. Okay, so I'm 65. I'm planning to retire in the near future, and then we're planning.
Yeah, actually, next month, June 1st.
Next month, and in 25 years, that's how long we need to make this plan last for. So let's see what happens when we kind of save and we look at what the planning process.
Yeah. So what happens with IncomeConductor is it creates a template that has some default assumptions in it, and then we build from that. So when we hit this save and customize, then what we see is this template that starts off just arbitrarily saying, we've got a $5,000 a month goal on it. The only thing that was consistent with the demographics that we just put in was that it's a 25-year plan, and it starts June 1st. But it quickly is saying, if 5,000 was what you wanted, for 25 years and you wanted inflation adjusted, and this is by default, and you can alter any of these assumptions, it's assuming a 3% inflation rate, it would take $1,278,000 to accomplish that.
Interesting.
So off of that, now you would start sharing your specifics, because I don't think in 35 years I've ever had a client come in and say, that's exactly me. You were reading my mind. How did you know?
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, there's 5-year increments. Is that just how you're breaking down the plan, or are you actually investing differently in those 5 segments there?
Yeah, so the whole premise behind segmentation, which is what IncomeConductor is based upon, and I started doing back in the early 80s, is that we're taking the client's lifetime and we're breaking it up into shorter time horizons, kind of bite-sized time horizons, so that I can identify, of this monthly income goal that they have, how much of their investments are going to be needed to deliver that immediately, versus how much of their investments they're not going to need to touch for income until, in this case, 20 years from now to deliver that last 5 years of income. So the money that we're not going to need for 20 years, we can invest that very differently and more aggressively than the money that we need to invest today to cover that first 5 years. And we're creating, in this case, and these segment links there can be any number of them, they can be any length, so you can have 1 to 10 segments. They can be anywhere from 1 to 10 years long. So you could create a 100-year retirement income plan or a 2-year retirement income plan and everything in between. But we literally are liquidating the segments one by one. So that first segment, in this case, that first 5 years, there's enough money being put into that to cover the first 5 years. And at the end of that 5, that money's gone. But meanwhile, during that 5, the other portfolios that we created are all reinvesting on themselves and growing. But then one by one, they're converted to that income delivering segment, because what we don't want to ever do, and people are certainly aware of that now, and they weren't 6 months ago, is to have a portfolio that is invested, is market facing, we're drawing income from it, and then we have a COVID event. And now all of a sudden the combination of our income coming out and the market driving it down even further could potentially drive that portfolio so low that even in a normal market recovery, it can't recover. So we're always taking income from a safe place that has no stock market exposure, and those accounts that do have market exposure are all just riding their cycles and reinvesting on themselves along the way.
Very cool.
So it not only is intuitive to a client, but it keeps clients invested during times like we're experiencing right now, where they're not happy that they're, in this case here, their segment 4 and 5 accounts may be down significantly, but they're not bailing out because they know they're not going to need them for 15 or 20 years. So it gives them the courage to stay invested.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the goal setting. You have 3 bubbles at the bottom about starting with the monthly income goal, which is what we did here with the $5,000, the default. Both monthly income and investment, and the investment goal. Which one is the most popular one to begin with?
It kind of depends on the situation and how close the client is to retiring. So, some people do come in and they'll say, hey, forget about everything else. I just need 5,000, in this case here, I need 5,000 a month for my investments. How much is that going to take to do that? Well, based on what are the default settings here, it's saying, well, you're going to need close to $1,278,000. In reverse, somebody may come in and say, hey, Phil, I've got $1 million in my 401k plan. I'm just curious, when I retire, how much income could I turn that into that I could count on for the rest of my life? So then we would do an investment goal. So let's say we jump over here and solve with an investment goal, and we now make that $1 million. I think I made it too big there. So it immediately recalculates and says, well, if it's $1 million that you have, then your beginning income is going to be about $3,900 per month. And then it would grow from there. So what this graph does is you can hover over it at any point. So it's saying that we're starting here at $3,900, And at the end of the plan, we'd actually be drawing $7,900 per month of income.
Hmm.
What we see with people that are, very close to retirement is they know both. They know, they say, I know how much assets we have, and we know how much income that we need. What we're really trying to identify is, do we have enough so that we can go in tomorrow and announce our retirement? So if we check both and we say we've got the $1 million in investments,
Hmm.
and let's say the client says, and I've got a goal of, $5,000 per month of net income. Well, immediately it's saying, I got bad news for you. You're in this pink area here. You're $279,000 short of what you're needing to carry it for the 25 years. So somewhere, in the 18th year, so at the beginning of the 19th year, you're now out of income and
Hmm.
out of assets.
Hmm.
Um, so now we start bringing other factors into play.
Hmm. Right, and it makes sense that obviously you can layer on inflation like you've done. You can layer on taxes. You can come up with spending goals for clients as well. And I can see how this can then become layered on to make it more realistic to the client's needs. Like you said at the beginning, no client's going to come in there and say, "Well, that's exactly my plan." But you can like engage with the client in the planning process in real time. You can do it virtually on a screen share. It looks like just like you're doing with me here. And I think that engaging client experience helps them learn what you're doing for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing, maybe more exciting for a client than to be involved in the actual building of their plan.
Hmm.
My daughter and son-in-law are building their dream home, and there's nothing more exciting than for them each day to go over there and look at the progress that's being made and make whatever changes from the original design, as it's being built, and as they think about, is this blueprint exactly what we wanted? So not only do we build a plan initially that the client is involved with, then we want to kind of monitor the progress of that plan along the way throughout a client's retirement and have a baseline here that we can make adjustments against as things change. So markets change, tax laws change, their situations change, and we can always then measure those changes against their original plan.
That's very cool. And I think one of the other important points for people out there to hear about and for clients to hear about is that even though we're constructing a plan and we're pretty detailed about what assumptions we're using, these are just estimates, right? These are to help us create a foundation that we can calibrate year over year during the annual client reviews, for example, and make sure they're on track. Or if the assumptions are wrong, we can start to see if there's shortfalls developing. But I think there's a famous expression: it's better to be approximately right than precisely wrong. And we're not trying to say, okay, well, we know you're going to live until 90. You can live until 95. And what do we do in that scenario? But it allows you to kind of adjust it for those different scenarios that might come up.
That's exactly right. And if sometimes I see mistakes that advisors will make, is they'll get so overly analytical that it's exactly what you say. They're going to be precisely wrong because, in fact, I always told clients after we built a plan that as soon as you get to the elevator, it's out of date, and the numbers aren't accurate anymore. So don't get hung up on how precise we were. Are you are you happy with the baseline that we created? And then we'll make modifications. A lot of my clients were aerospace engineers, and the engineering mind wants to be overly precise. But what they talk about are when they do like launches or what they call course corrections, where they say, okay, well, here's our trajectory,
Mm-hmm.
but we know once this thing is in the air, we're probably going to be making some corrections along the way as the weather conditions change or whatever it is that would impact this rocket from wherever it's going. We just want to make sure that it lands on the moon and not Mars.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes course corrections along the way, and that's what we're doing here.
Yeah, and I think that's the job of a great advisor like yourself is understanding your client, understanding what's going to resonate with them, doing it at their level, and really helping them construct their own plan at the end of the day. So really appreciate you taking the time to kind of go under the hood a little bit, show us the software IncomeConductor. I know we just scratched the surface here, but it's really wonderful to see what you've developed, and hope to have you on future episodes, Phil.
Okay, well, thank you, Mark.